guys! Welcome to another video. I'm really excited to be doing a 3-color challenge with you today. So what I've got here is I dumped all 100 tubes of my Sennelier paints into a great big bowl, and I closed my eyes and picked 3 random colors. I had probably a little bit more fun just digging my hands around in this bowl than was necessary, so I didn't really have to mix them up so much every time I picked a color, but it was really fun and it was enjoyable. And it was a tiny little piece of anarchy just dumping all these colors into a bowl and mixing them up. So the 3 colors I ended up with were Cobalt Green, Naples Yellow Deep, and Permanent Magenta. So you might think that I got a little lucky and it was pretty close to almost a sort of like a triad of colors, and the only variance was that this Permanent Magenta is much closer to a purplish color than it is to a red. So I actually ended up mostly with a palette that was very difficult for me to get a red with, because as this Permanent Magenta was a bit more of a purpley color, when I mixed that with my Naples Yellow, which is a very warm yellow, I ended up with something a lot closer to a brown. I made myself a little color wheel and experimented with some color mixes before I got started on this piece, and ultimately I was really excited to jump into it. This is the sketch that I created and put together for this painting, and I specifically set out some areas that I wanted to mask with masking fluid. If you're not familiar with masking fluid, it's like I don't even know, is it like silicone or plastic? I guess I should be more informed about these things. Anyway, how it works is you apply it, and it's a liquid when you apply it to your paper, and mine has a little fine tip point, so I could use that. If you have it just in a jar, you can use a brush to apply it, and it's opaque when you first apply it, and then as it dries, it becomes more transparent and more rubbery, and it protects the areas underneath. So if I paint over those areas, the places where the masking fluid are, the whiteness of the page is maintained and preserved underneath the masking fluid. So when I'm all done with my painting, I can peel that off and have white areas. So that's really useful if you're planning to do a large background with lots of little details that you want to kind of preserve to be painted later or to be left white entirely. So I thought about painting these when I was done and decided to just leave them white. So one of the interesting things about choosing to use my Sennelier watercolors for the purpose of this painting is that, I've talked about this a little bit before, Sennelier paints are very subtle. They don't give you initially that heavy vibrancy. Generally speaking, they don't give you that super saturated look right away. And that was definitely the case for me, even though I was using these colors right out of the tube. So some of these colors may look a little bit more saturated, but as I worked in layers, you're going to notice that it was a very slow, subtle build-up for me. And I actually almost didn't post this video. I almost scrapped the whole piece and decided that I was just going to do the 3-color challenge over, maybe with a different brand of paints that were more saturated and more vibrant. But I didn't, and I got up this morning and I looked through the footage and I was like, yep, this will work. I like it. I like it a lot better than my memories of it, just because while I was working on this piece, the slow buildup of colors, which I usually really like, I was just a bit more hesitant and a bit more unsure in the case of this piece, and I looked back on it feeling like I had failed somehow and like I wasn't really happy with how it had turned out. And there is one specific detail about this piece that I don't like, but overall it was a really enjoyable experience. And whenever I am in a place and in a mentality where I can just sit and devote some time to slowly and delicately building layers of paint, Sennelier is great for that. It's great for creating a long-lasting, enjoyable, subtle painting experience in the way I like to use them, and this piece was no exception in that regard. The 3-color challenge, the common variant of that is the 3-marker challenge. So a lot of people will use Copic markers or some other form of alcohol marker to randomly select 3 colors. I've actually done a 3-marker challenge on this channel. It seems so old now, but it was just last year, so I'll link that in the card if you want to see when I did that with Copic markers. But this time I wanted to work with watercolors, and the biggest variance with watercolors is you have a lot wider of a range of blendability, generally speaking, than with markers. So you can mix the colors together on a palette before you apply them to your piece, and it does give you a wider range, but not necessarily an unlimited range. So it's funny, this was probably the closest I have been recently in recent paintings to like more natural skin tones, just because my color palette was so limited. So I was able to get, you know, some greens and a browner color that will read closest to red in this piece, and yellow, and you know, I was able to get a lot of variety in the individual tones. But because I was limited to 3 specific original colors, things were a lot more limited, and I really enjoy working with more limited palettes. It really does help to keep the colors more cohesive while still allowing me to play within that range and kind of stretch the boundaries and work in that way. So that was really fun. I think my favorite mix of colors when working with these was probably the deepest, cooler blue sort of indigo tones that I will add to the background later. And I was really worried at first that I was going to be too limited and that I wouldn't be able to create a piece that I was happy with. But as I worked, I found that even more important than how the colors looked on the palette was the relationships to the colors within the piece itself. So when I put these colors next to each other, they read a specific way depending on what they're sitting next to. So having that bluish purple cool tones of the background, and then using more of my Naples yellow for the portrait, the face, the skin, the hair, and things like that, kind of gave me a warm and cool contrast, even though I was always only working with 3 different colors. And I really enjoyed kind of playing with that contrast and focusing more on color relationships and then the actual individual colors themselves, and that was really fun. You can see here, like once I start to lay in a darker color, everything else just looks so much lighter. But I do really like that softness of the Sennelier watercolors. I really enjoyed building up those layers, and while it was frustrating sometimes when I wasn't able to get what I wanted right away, it just ultimately just encouraged me to be more patient and to enjoy the process a little bit more. I really enjoy painting portraits at this larger size. I'm pretty sure this is a sheet of 9 inches by 12 inches hot press watercolor paper, and I think this is the Fabriano 25% cotton paper, which is probably my least favorite watercolor paper that I own, but I wanted to give it another try. Every once in a while you like forget that you don't dislike something, or you forget the reasons why, at least I do, and I go, it couldn't have been that bad, right? Maybe I should just, you know, I've learned some more. Maybe I should give it another try. And in the most cases, giving things another try once I am more experienced in a particular thing does allow me to use them a little bit better. I think the only exception to that is that Canson Montval paper that we talked about in my last video. I don't know. I guess if I'm doing a single layer, the paper's not too bad, but anyway, I'm sure in a couple months I'll go, hey, you know what? I'm sure that paper can't be as bad as I thought it was. I should go back and try that again. And I will, and maybe it'll work better. Who knows? But I really enjoyed building up layers with these, and towards the end I decided that I wanted her eyes to be different. So sometimes that throws me off when I have eyes the same for the majority of a piece and then decide towards the end that I want them to be different. It just changes the whole atmosphere of the piece when you have not similar, identical eye colors and things. So the part of the painting that I like the least is becoming more visible now, and it happens a lot. It's basically solidified during the sketching phase, and that is if you draw with your piece of paper flat on the table, but you're sitting up and you're not leaning directly over the table, so if you're viewing your piece at a bit of an angle, what happens is there's distortion. So if I'd had my piece of paper at an angle, so I was viewing it straight on, I would have been able to better see the fact that her face is actually a bit long. And it was okay during the sketching phase, but as I started to paint, especially when I thought I wanted this sort of reflective light on the bottom of her chin that you can kind of see here, it kind of elongated her face just a tiny bit more, and in the end, I felt like she had a little bit of like a horse face, and her head was a little bit too long. So that tiny little fact made me just want to throw this whole video, all the footage, the painting, all of it, just throw it out the window and go, I'll start over, I'll do it over another time. But I wanted to share this experience with you anyway. So it was fun. I enjoyed it. I like working with limited color palettes, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this as well. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video and to listen to me ramble week after week, because you do that and I appreciate it very much. I hope you're all having a wonderful week, and let me know what you think of this piece. If you liked it, you can give the video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching. Alright guys, bye bye.